In the dry, sun-scorched lands of the Southwest, the small ranch of Samuel stood quietly among the rolling hills and dusty plains. Life here was hard. Water was scarce, and the sun beat down mercilessly, leaving the soil cracked and thirsty. Samuel was a poor rancher, living in a modest house with his family. He had only a few cows, a small vegetable patch, and a well that barely produced enough water for his needs. Every day was a struggle to survive. But Samuel was proud of what he had built. He believed that hard work, patience, and honesty were the keys to life, even in a place as harsh as this. The region had long been a site of conflict. Settlers and the Apache tribes often clashed, and the memory of raids and attacks was fresh in everyone's mind. Samuel had seen neighbors lose livestock, homes, and even family members. Every morning, he would look out across his land, watching for signs of danger. The Apache warriors were skilled, quick, and relentless. Samuel knew that a single mistake could bring disaster. Yet, despite the danger, he worked tirelessly, tending to his cattle, repairing fences, and maintaining the little well that was his lifeline. One late afternoon, as the sun hung low and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, Samuel was guiding his cattle back from grazing. He noticed movement on the ridge, far in the distance. Squinting against the sunlight, he saw a group of riders approaching. His heart sank. There was no mistaking them, they were Apache warriors. The first thought that came to Samuel's mind was fear. He knew that these men could attack at any moment. He glanced at his family, who were working near the house, and felt a surge of protective instinct. His hands itched for a weapon, yet he hesitated. Something about the way these riders moved caught his attention. They were not charging recklessly, nor did they carry weapons ready to strike. Instead, they rode slowly, each face showing exhaustion, their horses struggling under the harsh sun. Samuel noticed the young warrior in front, Nantan, scanning the horizon anxiously. Dust clung to their clothing, their skin was cracked and sunburned, and their eyes reflected desperation. Samuel realized that these were not warriors prepared for battle. They were humans in extreme need. Thirst and fatigue had left them vulnerable, and survival seemed to be their only concern at that moment. Samuel's mind raced. He had a small bucket of water left from the well and a few pieces of bread in his pantry. His instinct told him to hide, to prepare for an attack, but another feeling stirred inside him, a deep sense of compassion. He remembered stories his grandfather had told about offering help to travelers, even strangers. He remembered how simple acts of kindness could sometimes change hearts and minds. For a brief moment, fear was replaced by courage. He decided to act, to extend help where it was least expected. Samuel ran to the well, the dry earth crunching under his worn boots. He filled a wooden bucket with cool water, the liquid glistening in the fading sunlight. The wind carried dust into his eyes, but he ignored it, calling out in a steady voice, "Come, there is water here." The Apache warriors stopped, their horses restless. They were cautious, unsure if this settler was setting a trap. Samuel waved, keeping his voice calm. Slowly, Nantan stepped forward. He looked Samuel in the eye, his expression one of disbelief. The other warriors followed, each moving with careful suspicion. As they approached the well, Samuel handed the bucket to the first warrior. The water was eagerly cupped in hands that had been dry for hours. Samuel watched closely, ready to defend his home if necessary. Yet, as the warriors drank, he noticed something extraordinary. There was no aggression, no threat in their movements, only relief and gratitude. One by one, they drank deeply, letting the water cool their parched throats. Samuel offered the bread, and they accepted, eating slowly and carefully, savoring the sustenance as if it were gold. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains. Samuel and the Apache warriors sat together near the well, sharing what little food he had. They spoke in broken English, gestures, and nods, trying to convey their stories. Nantan explained that they had traveled far from their village in search of water and resources, that the journey had been grueling and unforgiving. Samuel listened quietly, realizing that these men were not monsters or enemies, they were human beings, struggling to survive in a harsh and unforgiving land. Hours passed as the sky turned purple and finally deep blue. The desert became quiet, save for the low murmurs of conversation and the occasional rustle of the wind through the dry grass. Samuel's heart felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a sense of hope he had not felt in years. He realized that he had taken a risk, that helping his enemies could have cost him dearly. Yet, in that moment, it felt worth it. The Apache warriors looked at him with respect, their suspicions slowly melting into something resembling trust. Before they left, Nantan spoke again, this time in clearer English. He thanked Samuel, expressing gratitude not just for the water and bread, but for treating them with dignity. He explained that they had never expected mercy from a settler, and that this simple act would be remembered. Samuel nodded, smiling humbly, feeling a connection that transcended years of conflict. The warriors mounted their horses and rode away, leaving Samuel standing by his well, watching them disappear into the horizon. That night, as Samuel sat by the fire with his family, he reflected on the day's events. The fear and tension that had filled his heart for so long were replaced by a quiet hope. He understood that trust, respect, and compassion could sometimes accomplish what violence never could. He knew that the small act of offering water had not only saved lives that day, but had planted a seed of understanding in the hearts of the Apache warriors. It was a seed that might one day grow into peace. Word of Samuel's actions spread quickly. Travelers, neighbors, and even other Apache bands heard the story of the poor rancher who had dared to show mercy. In a land divided by fear, a single act of humanity began to ripple outward. Samuel did not seek recognition, nor did he expect it. He continued his daily routine, tending cattle, repairing fences, and drawing water from his well. Yet, the world around him had shifted slightly. The fear that had dominated his life began to ease, replaced by a fragile hope that perhaps, someday, settlers and Apache could coexist without constant bloodshed. For Samuel, that day marked more than an encounter, it was a turning point. He had acted not out of bravery in battle, but out of compassion, and in doing so, had shown that courage could take many forms. As the stars lit the desert sky, Samuel felt a quiet satisfaction. He had done what he believed was right, and in the process, had touched lives in ways he could not yet fully understand. The desert was still harsh, the sun still relentless, and the challenges of life remained. But for the first time in years, Samuel felt a deep connection to the land and its people. A reminder that even in a world of conflict, humanity could shine through. And so, in the dry, sun-baked plains of the Southwest, a poor rancher's simple act of offering water to his Apache enemies became the first small step toward a larger change. A story of courage, kindness, and hope that would be remembered long after the sun had set. The days after that fateful meeting at the well brought a subtle but powerful change across the land. Samuel continued his daily routine, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and working in his small vegetable patch. Yet he noticed something unusual. The air of tension that had always hung over his ranch seemed lighter. Travelers passing by nodded respectfully, aware of the story that had spread about the poor rancher who had offered water to his enemies. It was a small change, but in a land so full of fear and suspicion, even small changes could have great meaning. Samuel had barely slept that first night after the Apache warriors left. He kept replaying the events in his mind, thinking about the courage it had taken to act with kindness. Nantan and his warriors were not just strangers, they were skilled fighters, men who had the power to destroy his home if they chose. Yet Samuel had offered help, and in return, he had received respect. That realization gave him a quiet sense of pride. But more importantly, he understood that trust, once earned, could change hearts and minds in ways that no battle ever could. Over the next few weeks, Samuel began to see the impact of his actions. Apache warriors who passed near his ranch no longer viewed him as a threat. Some would pause from a distance, nodding politely. Others stopped briefly to ask about the health of his cattle or to share news from their villages. Samuel was cautious, but patient. He spoke kindly, listened carefully, and continued offering small gestures of goodwill whenever it was safe, refilling a trough for thirsty horses, or leaving food where it could be found. These small acts slowly built a fragile but growing bridge between the two sides. Nantan, the young warrior who had first accepted Samuel's kindness, became an important figure in this growing change. He shared Samuel's story with his people, explaining how the settler had treated them with respect and generosity. The elders of the Apache tribes were impressed. They began to consider a new approach: selective raids instead of blind attacks, negotiation instead of constant violence. Samuel's single act of compassion had become a lesson in strategy, showing that humanity and understanding could be more powerful than fear and hatred. Word spread beyond Samuel's ranch. Other settlers began to hear the story and were inspired to act with caution and care when possible. Simple acts like leaving water in known safe areas or offering basic assistance without provoking conflict became more common. Slowly, a new pattern emerged: fewer attacks, more cautious encounters, and occasional conversations between settlers and Apache warriors. Samuel never sought recognition for what he had done. He remained humble, continuing to live his life quietly. Yet the effect of his actions was far-reaching. One day, as Samuel repaired a section of fence, he noticed Nantan approaching again, riding alone this time. Samuel's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. Nantan dismounted and extended his hand in greeting, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable. The two men spoke slowly, carefully, sharing news about the land, the weather, and the well-being of their people. They talked about the challenges of survival, the hardships of the desert, and the hope that someday, life might be easier for everyone in the region. Each meeting strengthened the fragile bond of trust, a bond built on simple kindness and mutual respect. Over the months, Samuel's ranch became a symbol of hope. Travelers and neighbors often came to see him, eager to hear the story firsthand. The tale of the poor rancher who offered water to his enemies spread throughout the region, reaching not only settlers but also nearby Apache bands. Children who had grown up hearing only stories of fear and conflict were told a new story, a story of courage, compassion, and the power of humanity to change the course of history. The transformation was not instant. Tensions and challenges remained. Some settlers were skeptical, and some Apache warriors were wary. But the seeds of understanding had been planted. Raids became more predictable, with warnings often given in advance. Small exchanges of resources occurred in ways that reduced conflict. Samuel's simple act of offering water had inspired a pattern of behavior that went far beyond his ranch. It showed that even in a world marked by violence and suspicion, trust could grow if someone dared to extend their hand in peace. As the years passed, Samuel's relationship with Nantan and his people deepened. They met regularly, sometimes at the well, sometimes under the shade of a lone mesquite tree. Samuel shared stories about his family, his struggles, and his dreams. Nantan spoke about his people, their traditions, and the land they called home. Through these exchanges, both sides gained a deeper understanding of one another. The desert, once a symbol of fear and scarcity, became a place of connection and cautious friendship. Samuel's family witnessed this transformation as well. His children learned from their father the importance of courage and compassion. They watched as strangers became friends, as enemies became allies, and as the cycle of fear and violence slowly began to change. These lessons were more valuable than any treasure, more lasting than any wealth. They saw firsthand that kindness could be a force stronger than fear, and that one person's actions could ripple outward in ways they never imagined. The local authorities eventually took notice. Word of Samuel's act reached military leaders and settlers across the region. Some were surprised that a single gesture could have such influence, while others saw it as proof that peace was possible, even in the harshest conditions. Samuel, however, remained grounded. He never considered himself a hero. He had done what he believed was right. And in doing so, he had helped to change the course of many lives. Years later, historians would reflect on that moment at the well as a turning point. It was not a battle won with weapons or strategy, but with empathy and courage. Samuel's story became a lesson for generations. That humanity could shine even in the midst of conflict, and that one simple act could inspire hope and change in ways no one could predict. The desert, once a place of fear, became a place of stories, stories that reminded everyone that compassion was a powerful tool, sometimes more powerful than the sword. Even as Samuel grew older, he continued his work on the ranch, always ready to offer help where it was safe to do so. He did not seek reward or recognition. The satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference was enough, and the bond he had formed with Nantan and the Apache warriors endured. Their relationship became a symbol of what could happen when courage met kindness, when fear was replaced with understanding, and when enemies chose to see each other as human beings rather than threats. In the end, Samuel's life was quiet but meaningful. He never left his small ranch. Yet his story traveled far beyond the hills and deserts of the Southwest. Travelers told it, settlers passed it along, and the Apache tribes carried it in their hearts. The war did not end immediately, but a path toward peace had begun. Samuel's act of offering water had not only saved lives, it had sparked a transformation in the hearts of many. It was proof that even the smallest gesture, when done with sincerity and courage, could change the course of history. And so, in the harsh and unforgiving desert, a poor rancher's kindness became more than an act of generosity. It became a lesson for all, that trust, respect, and humanity could thrive even in times of conflict, and that one person's courage could inspire hope and change for generations to come. Samuel never sought fame or recognition, but his legacy endured. The well where he offered water became a symbol of peace, a reminder that compassion could build bridges stronger than any wall, and that even in the driest, harshest lands, the human spirit could flourish.